69 years old, retired health teacher. She taught nutrition for a living, cooked seaweed soup almost every morning, and believed she was doing everything right for her bones. Her bone density scan came back showing advanced osteoporosis. How does that happen? She was eating one of the most calcium rich foods on the planet several times a week for years. But the way she was preparing it was quietly destroying the very nutrient she was eating it for. And what worries me is that millions of Americans are now making the same kinds of mistakes. Not with soup necessarily, but with the seaweed snacks, the kelp supplements, and the dried wakame that have become part of everyday grocery shopping. Today, I am going to walk you through 5 of the most common seaweed mistakes, ranked from the one that wastes your money all the way to the one that can land you in my emergency room. And I will show you exactly how to fix each one. I have spent years in emergency medicine. I have seen what happens when people take health advice that sounds right but misses something important. Seaweed is one of those foods where the gap between what people believe and what actually matters is wider than most realize. Here is the thing most people do not know. A large nutritional tracking study followed over 400 women aged 60 and older who ate seaweed regularly. Their seaweed intake was roughly the same, but the calcium their bodies actually absorbed varied by nearly 3 to 1. Same food, same frequency, completely different results. The difference was not the seaweed, it was what they did with it. That is what today is really about. Not whether seaweed is healthy. It is. The question is whether the way you are using it is giving you what you think it is, or whether it is quietly working against you. Let me walk you through the 5 mistakes. And stay with me through all 5, because the last 2 are the ones most people have never heard of, and they are the ones that matter most for your safety. Mistake number 1, the high heat oil trap. If you have ever made seaweed soup at home, or if you stir fry dried seaweed into a dish, chances are you start with oil in a hot pan. Sesame oil, maybe olive oil, maybe whatever cooking oil is on the counter. You heat it up, drop in the seaweed, and get that rich, nutty aroma going before adding water or broth. It feels right. It smells wonderful. And it is a tradition that goes back generations in many families. But here is the catch. Every cooking oil has something called a smoke point. That is the temperature at which the oil starts to break down chemically and release harmful compounds. Sesame oil, the one most commonly used in traditional seaweed preparations, has a smoke point of roughly 320 degrees Fahrenheit. That sounds high enough, right? It is not. An empty pan on a gas burner reaches 400 degrees in under 2 minutes. The moment you pour sesame oil into a preheated pan, you have already blown past its smoke point. When that happens, the oil starts generating compounds like benzopyrene, which the International Agency for Research on Cancer has classified as a group 1 carcinogen. That is the same classification as cigarette smoke, the same compound that forms when you char meat directly over flames. Now, once or twice is not going to cause a problem. Your body can handle occasional exposure, but if you are making seaweed soup or stir-fried seaweed 2 or 3 times a week, month after month, year after year, that exposure accumulates. And the science on cumulative benzopyrene exposure is not ambiguous. It increases cancer risk over time. The fix is remarkably simple. Add your sesame oil at the end, after the heat is off. Drizzle it into the finished soup or over the plated dish. You get the full flavor, the full aroma, and 0 carcinogen risk. It takes no extra time, no extra money, just a change in sequence. I know some of you are thinking that it will not taste the same. I understand that instinct, but try it once. Dry salt the seaweed and any protein first without oil. Add your broth, simmer it, and then stir in a teaspoon of toasted sesame oil right at the end. What you will notice is that the sesame flavor is actually sharper and cleaner because the heat has not broken it down. If you absolutely prefer to start with oil in the pan, use one with a higher smoke point. Avocado oil handles temperatures up to about 500 degrees Fahrenheit. Refined sunflower oil sits around 450. Either one gives you a much wider safety margin. You can even mix a little sesame oil in after removing from heat for that flavor. This is a small change, and it is the kind of small change that adds up over decades. The food you cook for your family every week deserves that attention. Mistake number 2, the calcium blocker hiding in your recipe. This one surprised me when I first came across the research. And if you eat seaweed specifically because you believe it is good for your bones, this is the part that matters most. Seaweed is genuinely one of the best non-dairy sources of calcium available. Dried wakame contains about 150 milligrams of calcium per 100 grams. That is actually more calcium per weight than the same amount of whole milk. For people who are lactose intolerant, or for anyone trying to reduce dairy, that makes seaweed look like a natural solution. But calcium has a quirk. It does not just float into your bones on its own. It needs a partner to get absorbed, and it has enemies that block it. Think of calcium like a delivery package sitting on your doorstep without someone to carry it inside. It just sits there. Eventually, the rain gets to it, and it is gone. Vitamin D is the person who carries that package inside. Without enough vitamin D, calcium passes straight through your digestive system and you never absorb it. But here is the part most people miss. Certain compounds actively intercept that package before it even reaches the door. Sulfur compounds and phosphorus, found in high concentrations in onions and scallions, bind to calcium in your intestines and form insoluble complexes. Your body cannot break those complexes apart. The calcium you ate leaves your body without ever reaching your bloodstream. A woman I treated several years ago, Diane, 67, retired school librarian outside of Pittsburgh, came in after a fall on her front steps, fractured her wrist. Her bone density was alarmingly low. When we talked about her diet, she told me she was meticulous. Seaweed soup 3 to 4 times a week, had been doing it for years, specifically for the calcium. She always loaded the soup with scallions and onion for flavor. She had no idea those ingredients were neutralizing the very reason she was making the soup. Now, I want to be clear about something. Adding onion to seaweed does not destroy every nutrient. The fiber is still there. The iodine is still there. The alginic acid is still there. It specifically blocks calcium absorption. So if you are eating seaweed for general health, onion is not a disaster. But if you are eating it because you are worried about your bones, if osteoporosis runs in your family, if you are a woman past menopause or a man over 70, then this detail becomes genuinely important. What should you use instead? Garlic. Garlic does not interfere with calcium absorption. In fact, the allicin in garlic has its own anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial benefits. Swap the scallion for 3 or 4 cloves of minced garlic, and you have a soup that tastes arguably better and actually delivers the calcium to your bones. And here is how to make that calcium absorption even stronger. Pair your seaweed with a source of vitamin D. Dried shiitake mushrooms are one of the best plant-based options. When shiitake mushrooms are dried in sunlight, their vitamin D content increases dramatically, sometimes by tenfold. A nutritional absorption study found that people who ate seaweed alongside vitamin D-rich foods absorbed 43% more calcium than those who ate seaweed alone. Same seaweed, nearly half, again, as much calcium reaching the bones. That is a substantial difference, and it costs you nothing but a handful of dried mushrooms in the pot. The National Institutes of Health recommends 600 to 800 international units of vitamin D daily for adults, and many Americans, particularly those over 60, are deficient without knowing it. If you are eating seaweed for bone health, ask your doctor to check your vitamin D level at your next visit. That single blood test, 25-hydroxy vitamin D, tells you whether the calcium you are eating has any chance of doing its job. Mistake number 3, the iodine overload no one warns you about. This is where the conversation shifts from optimization to safety. And if you take thyroid medication, or if anyone in your family does, this section is not optional. Seaweed is the single richest dietary source of iodine on the planet. Your body needs iodine to make thyroid hormones. Those hormones regulate your metabolism, your energy, your body temperature, even how clearly you think. Without enough iodine, the thyroid cannot do its job. That much is well known. But here's the part that trips people up. More iodine is not better, and the amounts in seaweed are not small. The recommended daily intake of iodine for adults in the United States is 150 micrograms. That is the amount the National Institutes of Health says you need for normal thyroid function. The tolerable upper limit, meaning the most you should consistently consume without medical supervision, is 1,100 micrograms per day. A single serving of dried kelp can contain anywhere from 500 to over 2,500 micrograms of iodine. One serving. That is 3 to 17 times the daily recommendation and potentially more than double the upper safety limit in one sitting. For most healthy people with no thyroid issues, occasional seaweed consumption is fine. Your kidneys clear excess iodine through urine, but if you are eating seaweed daily, or if you are eating it multiple times a day, or if you have any history of thyroid disease, this becomes a real clinical concern. Excess iodine does something paradoxical. Instead of boosting thyroid function, it can actually shut it down. The thyroid essentially protects itself by reducing hormone production. This is called the Wolff-Chaikoff effect, and it can trigger or worsen hypothyroidism, leaving you fatigued, cold, constipated, foggy, and gaining weight without any change in your eating habits. In people with an autoimmune thyroid condition like Hashimoto's, which affects roughly 5 in every 100 Americans, excess iodine can trigger an inflammatory flare. The American Thyroid Association has issued a formal statement advising against consuming more than 500 micrograms of iodine daily from supplements or kelp products. That is a serious warning from the leading thyroid authority in the country. Now, here is the part I need you to pay attention to. 3 groups of people are at real risk from too much seaweed. If you fall into any of these groups, or if someone you love does, this is not general advice. This is specific. The first is anyone with chronic kidney disease. Seaweed is also high in potassium. If your kidneys are working normally, they regulate potassium beautifully. You eat it, your body uses what it needs, and the rest leaves through urine. But when kidney function drops, and roughly 37 million Americans have some degree of chronic kidney disease, according to the CDC, potassium starts to accumulate in the blood. The early signs are subtle: muscle weakness, tingling, legs that feel heavy for no clear reason. But as potassium climbs higher, it reaches the heart, and that is when it becomes dangerous. Genuinely dangerous. Hyperkalemia, which is dangerously high blood potassium, is one of the things I watch for constantly in the ER. It can cause cardiac arrhythmias that are life-threatening. If you or someone you love has been told their kidney function is reduced, if their EGFR, the estimated glomerular filtration rate on their blood work, is below 60, seaweed needs to be treated with real caution. Not eliminated necessarily, but limited and discussed with a kidney specialist. The second group, blood thinners, specifically warfarin, which is still one of the most widely prescribed anticoagulants in America. Seaweed contains vitamin K, and vitamin K directly counteracts warfarin. If you eat a large amount of seaweed one week and then skip it the next, your vitamin K levels swing, and so does your blood clotting ability. That kind of fluctuation is exactly what increases the risk of either a dangerous clot or dangerous bleeding. If you are on warfarin, the rule is consistency. If you eat seaweed, eat the same amount at the same frequency, and make sure your doctor knows. Your INR, the blood test that measures how well warfarin is working, needs to be checked regularly. The third group might surprise you, 12% of Americans. That is how many people take levothyroxine, the synthetic thyroid hormone, at some point in their lives. Iodine from seaweed can interfere with how your body processes this medication. It can make your dose effectively too high or too low, and either direction has consequences. If you are on levothyroxine, talk to your endocrinologist before adding regular seaweed to your diet. This is not something to guess about. So what do you actually do? Here is your ladder. Clear, simple, and specific. If you are healthy, no thyroid or kidney issues, no blood thinners, eating seaweed a few times a week, you are fine. Enjoy it. Just follow the preparation tips I have given you. If you eat seaweed daily or in large amounts, cut back to 2 or 3 servings a week and soak it before cooking. That is a reasonable adjustment you can make today. If you have been diagnosed with any thyroid condition, schedule a visit with your endocrinologist and bring up your seaweed intake. Ask whether your current levels of consumption are safe for your specific situation. Do not wait for your annual checkup if you are eating it frequently. If you have chronic kidney disease, especially if your EGFR is under 60, call your nephrologist or your primary care doctor before your next serving. Potassium restriction may already be part of your treatment plan, and seaweed could be pushing you past your daily limit without you knowing it. If you have been taking a kelp supplement and you are experiencing new fatigue, weight gain, cold sensitivity, constipation, brain fog, or hair thinning, stop the supplement and call your doctor. Those are classic signs of iodine-induced hypothyroidism, and they often get missed because people do not connect the symptoms back to the supplement. If you are on warfarin and you have started eating seaweed inconsistently, tell your prescribing doctor your INR may need to be rechecked and your dose adjusted. And if you experience sudden muscle weakness, heart palpitations, or an irregular heartbeat, and you have known kidney disease, that is not a wait-and-see situation. Go to urgent care or call 911. Dangerously high potassium is a cardiac emergency. I know a trip to the ER is expensive. I know that fear of the bill keeps people home longer than they should stay. But the thing I saw over and over in emergency medicine was people who waited, and the damage that built up while they waited cost them far more in health and in money than being checked and sent home ever would have. Being told everything is fine is a good outcome. That is not wasting anyone's time. Here's the simple rule for most people. If you are generally healthy and have no thyroid or kidney issues, 2 to 3 servings of seaweed per week is a reasonable amount. Do not eat it every day in large quantities. Do not make a large batch and eat from it for 5 consecutive days. Spread it out. That gives your body time to clear excess iodine and potassium naturally. And the soaking trick matters here. If you soak dried seaweed in cold water for 30 minutes before cooking, you reduce the iodine content by roughly 35%. That is a meaningful reduction, but do not soak it for longer than an hour because after that, a compound called alginic acid starts leaching out. Alginic acid is one of seaweed's most valuable components. It binds to heavy metals and toxins in your gut and helps escort them out of your body. It also helps lower cholesterol. You want to keep that. Cold water, 30 minutes. That is the window. Mistake number 4, the heavy metal blind spot. This is the one that almost nobody talks about, and it may be the most important safety issue of all. Seaweed absorbs whatever is in the water around it. That is how it concentrates iodine so effectively. But it does not only absorb iodine, it absorbs arsenic, cadmium, lead, mercury. Whatever is dissolved in the ocean water where it grows ends up in the seaweed tissue. A major review published in the Journal of Agriculture and Food Research in 2025 analyzed heavy metal contamination across dozens of seaweed species. The conclusion was blunt. Heavy metal contamination in seaweed is common, and excessive or prolonged intake is potentially hazardous. The researchers specifically called out arsenic and cadmium as the most concerning. The FDA has acknowledged that seaweed is a notable source of both arsenic and cadmium exposure for American consumers. But here is the problem. There are currently no seaweed-specific safety regulations in the United States. The FDA sets limits for heavy metals in general foods, but seaweed falls into a regulatory gap. There is no specific maximum arsenic level for the kelp snacks you buy at Costco or Trader Joe's. Independent laboratory testing has found measurable levels of all 4 major heavy metals: lead, cadmium, mercury, and arsenic in popular seaweed snack brands sold in American stores. Some products had arsenic concentrations well above levels that would trigger concern under the European Union's stricter regulations. Now, I need to put this in perspective because I do not want you to panic. The form of arsenic matters. Organic arsenic, which is the form most commonly found in seaweed, is significantly less toxic than inorganic arsenic. And trace amounts of heavy metals exist in many foods, including rice, leafy greens, and drinking water. The question is always about dose and duration. But if you are eating seaweed daily, or if you are giving it to children, or if you are taking concentrated kelp supplements, the exposure adds up. And unlike the food itself, kelp supplements concentrate everything, including the heavy metals, into a small capsule. Here is what I would recommend. First, vary your seaweed sources. Do not eat the same brand or the same type every time. Different species from different waters carry different contamination profiles. Rotating reduces your cumulative exposure to any single contaminant. Second, look for brands that do third-party heavy metal testing and publish the results. Companies that test for arsenic, cadmium, lead, and mercury and make those numbers available are the ones worth buying from. If a company does not test or will not share results, that tells you something. Third, prefer seaweed harvested from cleaner waters. Seaweed from the North Atlantic, New Zealand, and certain parts of the North Pacific tends to have lower contamination levels. Seaweed from heavily industrialized coastlines carries higher risk. Fourth, and this is critical, soaking before cooking helps here too. That 30-minute cold water soak I mentioned earlier does not just reduce iodine. Research shows it also reduces water-soluble heavy metal content. One more reason the soak matters. And fifth, if you are pregnant, nursing, or feeding seaweed to young children, this is the time to be most careful. Developing brains and nervous systems are significantly more vulnerable to heavy metal exposure than adult systems. Keep serving small and infrequent, and choose the cleanest sources you can find. Mistake number 5, the supplement trap. This is the mistake that sends people to the emergency room, and I have seen it happen. Gary, 71, retired electrician from Sacramento. His wife had read that kelp was good for thyroid health, so she bought a bottle of kelp supplement capsules from a health food store. Gary started taking them daily, 2 capsules with breakfast. He felt fine for the first couple of weeks. Then he started feeling tired. Then his hands and feet were cold all the time. Then he gained 9 pounds in 3 weeks without eating any differently. His wife thought he was depressed. She made him come see a doctor. His TSH, the thyroid stimulating hormone level, was through the roof. His thyroid had essentially shut down, not because of disease, because he had been flooding his system with iodine. Each capsule contained over 1,000 micrograms of iodine. 2 per day meant he was taking more than 13 times the recommended daily amount every single day. He stopped the supplements. His thyroid recovered over the next several weeks, but that is not always the outcome. In some cases, particularly in people with underlying Hashimoto's disease they did not know they had, the damage from iodine overload can trigger permanent thyroid dysfunction. The American Thyroid Association's warning is specific. They advise against any iodine or kelp supplement containing more than 500 micrograms per daily dose. But when independent researchers have tested kelp supplements sold in the United States, some contained iodine levels that were thousands of percent above what the label claimed. Here is the difference between whole food seaweed and a supplement. When you eat a sheet of nori or a bowl of wakame soup, the iodine is bound within the food matrix. Your body absorbs it gradually over hours as you digest the fiber and the protein and the other compounds. Your thyroid has time to regulate. It is like drinking water slowly throughout the day. A concentrated kelp supplement is like drinking a gallon in 10 minutes. The iodine hits your bloodstream all at once. Your thyroid has no time to adjust, and the dose is often far higher than what you would get from food, even if you ate seaweed at every meal. That difference matters a lot. The fix is straightforward. Get your iodine from food, not from capsules. If you eat seaweed 2 to 3 times a week in normal food portions, you are almost certainly getting enough iodine. If your doctor has specifically told you that you are iodine deficient and recommends a supplement, use a pharmaceutical grade iodine supplement with a known tested dose, not a kelp capsule from a shelf where no one has verified what is actually inside it. I want to be honest with you about something. I see a pattern in emergency medicine that repeats itself. Someone reads that a natural compound is good for them. They find a supplement that concentrates it. They take it every day, often at doses far above what food would provide, because more feels like better. And then weeks or months later, something goes wrong that they never connected back to the supplement. The supplement industry in the United States is not regulated the way prescription drugs are. The FDA does not approve supplements before they go on the shelf. What you see on the label is what the manufacturer chose to put there, and independent testing shows that label accuracy is often poor. If seaweed is the food, think of it as a gentle stream feeding your garden. If the supplement is the source, think of it as a fire hose aimed at a flower bed. The water is the same. The delivery is what causes the damage. Now, I have spent a lot of time on the mistakes that was necessary because those mistakes are the difference between seaweed helping you and seaweed hurting you. But I do not want you to walk away thinking seaweed is dangerous. It is not. When used correctly, it is one of the most nutritionally dense foods available to you. So let me show you what seaweed can actually do when you get the preparation right, because the upside is real and you deserve to hear it. Stay with me. The first benefit that most people underestimate is blood pressure. A systematic review and meta-analysis published in the Journal of Human Nutrition and Dietetics in 2025 pulled together every randomized controlled trial on edible algae and blood pressure through the end of 2024. These were real clinical trials, not observational studies. The conclusion was that regular consumption of edible seaweed significantly reduced blood pressure in human subjects. The bioactive compounds responsible include peptides, fucoidin, polyphenols, potassium, and omega 3 fatty acids. That matters enormously for this audience. Nearly half of American adults have high blood pressure, according to the AHA, and most of them are over 50. If something as simple as adding seaweed to your diet 2 or 3 times a week can contribute to lowering that number, that is worth knowing. Now, seaweed is not going to replace your blood pressure medication. Let me be clear about that. But if you are already on medication and you are looking for dietary support, or if you are in that gray zone where your readings are elevated but not yet at the point where medication has been started, seaweed is a reasonable addition to discuss with your primary care doctor. That alone is worth knowing. But it is not the most surprising part. The second benefit is gut health. And this one matters more than you would expect. Research published in 2022 found that the polysaccharides in seaweed, the complex carbohydrates that give it that slightly slippery texture, significantly increased populations of beneficial gut bacteria. In controlled experiments, subjects consuming seaweed polysaccharides showed healthier microbial diversity, with an increase in beneficial species and a decrease in harmful ones. The downstream effects included reduced inflammation markers and improved weight regulation. Why does that matter beyond digestion? Because the gut-brain axis is one of the most active areas of medical research right now. Your gut microbiome communicates directly with your brain through the vagus nerve and through chemical signals that influence mood, cognition, and even the risk of neurodegenerative disease. A healthier gut environment appears to support a healthier brain over time. If you are over 60, think about what that means for you. Staying sharp, remembering your grandchildren's names, keeping up with the conversation at dinner. That is not abstract. That is independence. And anything that supports that process through daily food choices rather than medication is worth understanding. The third benefit is blood sugar management. And this number stopped me the first time I saw it. 15. That is the glycemic index of most seaweed. 15. On a scale where white bread sits at around 75 and white rice ranges from 70 to 80, most types of seaweed score between 15 and 20. That is lower than almost any other food you can name. For the roughly 100 million Americans living with diabetes or prediabetes, according to CDC data, a food that delivers minerals, fiber, and flavor without spiking blood sugar is valuable. Adding seaweed to a meal can blunt the glycemic response of the foods you eat with it. There is a simple combination worth trying. Seaweed salad with cucumber and a splash of vinegar. Both seaweed and cucumber have glycemic indices around 15. The acetic acid in vinegar has been shown in multiple studies to further slow glucose absorption after meals. It is a side dish that is cool, refreshing, costs almost nothing to make, and quietly does meaningful work for your metabolic health. If you are monitoring your blood sugar, try adding a small seaweed side to one meal a day for 2 weeks and see what your post-meal numbers look like. That is the kind of self-experiment that can tell you something useful. Measure your blood sugar 30 minutes after a meal with seaweed and compare it to the same meal without seaweed. Write both numbers down. After a week, look at the pattern. You are not diagnosing anything. You are learning how your body responds to what you eat, and that knowledge is more powerful than any generic advice I or anyone else can give you. But wait, there is one more pairing you should know about. And this one is clever. Tofu and seaweed together. The saponins naturally present in tofu help your body excrete excess iodine. So if you are concerned about getting too much iodine from seaweed, but you do not want to give it up, adding tofu to the dish creates a natural buffer. Tofu also contains lecithin, a compound that supports the cell membranes of neurons in your brain. A health research study following adults over 60 found that those who ate tofu regularly showed cognitive decline that was 32% slower compared to those who did not. That is not a miracle food claim. That is a pattern in the data that aligns with what we know about lecithin and brain cell maintenance. So seaweed with tofu gives you a dual benefit, iodine buffering, and cognitive support. That is not a bad return from a $10 bag of ingredients. Now, here is where it gets interesting. The fourth benefit involves a compound called fucoxanthin. Fucoxanthin is the brown pigment that gives seaweed its color. Research published by marine science teams has found that fucoxanthin activates a protein called UCP1 in white adipose tissue. In plain English, it turns on a fat burning switch in the type of fat that normally just sits there storing energy. In animal studies, fucoxanthin supplementation led to meaningful reductions in visceral fat, the deep belly fat that surrounds your organs and drives metabolic disease. Human research is still in earlier stages, but the biological mechanism is well documented, and regulatory agencies have begun recognizing seaweed-derived compounds as functional ingredients for body fat reduction. Belly fat, the kind that wraps around your liver and kidneys, the kind your doctor worries about even if you feel fine. Now, I am not going to tell you that eating seaweed will melt it away. That is not how responsible medicine works. But the science suggests that regular seaweed consumption, combined with other healthy habits, may support the metabolic processes that help manage visceral fat over time. And visceral fat is not a cosmetic issue. It is a medical issue. It is directly linked to insulin resistance, heart disease, and chronic inflammation. The fifth benefit connects to something I think about a lot as a doctor who treats emergencies. Fucoidan, a sulfated polysaccharide found in brown seaweed, has shown neuroprotective effects in recent research. A 2025 review found that fucoidan reduces brain inflammation and protects neural cells from oxidative damage. This does not mean seaweed prevents dementia. We cannot make that claim. But the biological pathways it supports are the same pathways involved in age-related cognitive decline, and supporting those pathways through diet is a low-risk, potentially meaningful strategy. The Alzheimer's Association estimates that roughly 7 million Americans aged 65 and older are living with Alzheimer's disease. The numbers are growing. Anything we can do earlier, through food, through movement, through sleep, through managing blood pressure and blood sugar, contributes to a longer window of cognitive health. Let me bring this all together now. Here is the pattern I want you to remember. Seaweed is powerful, but power without precision can backfire. 5 mistakes, 5 fixes. Mistake 1. Cooking with unstable oils at high heat generates carcinogens. The fix is to add sesame oil at the end after the heat is off, or use a high smoke point oil like avocado oil for cooking. Mistake 2. Pairing seaweed with onion or scallion blocks calcium absorption. The fix is to use garlic instead and pair seaweed with a vitamin D source like dried shiitake mushrooms to boost calcium uptake by as much as 43%. Mistake 3. Overconsumption of iodine can suppress your thyroid and cause problems for people with kidney disease, people on warfarin, and people on thyroid medication. The fix is to limit seaweed to 2 or 3 servings per week. Soak dried seaweed in cold water for 30 minutes before cooking and talk to your doctor if you have any of those conditions. Mistake 4. Seaweed can contain heavy metals, including arsenic and cadmium, with no seaweed-specific safety regulations in the US. The fix is to rotate brands and species, choose brands that do third-party testing, prefer seaweed from cleaner waters, and keep portions moderate, especially for children. Mistake 5. Kelp supplements deliver massive, unregulated doses of iodine that can shut down your thyroid. The fix is to get your iodine from food, not capsules. The American Thyroid Association recommends no more than 500 micrograms of iodine daily from supplements. And here is the part underneath all of it. The people who do best with their health are not the ones who find the perfect food or the perfect supplement. They are the ones who learn how to use good tools correctly. Seaweed is a very good tool. What I have shown you today is how to use it without cutting yourself. If you have someone in your family who eats seaweed regularly, or who takes kelp supplements, or who has a thyroid condition, share this with them. This is the kind of information that changes how people make small daily decisions. And those small decisions are the ones that add up over years. One thing you can do today, just one. The next time you prepare seaweed, soak it in cold water for 30 minutes first. That one step reduces iodine, reduces certain water-soluble contaminants, and preserves the beneficial compounds. It takes no effort, no money, and no special equipment, just a bowl and a clock. If you are on Medicare, your annual wellness visit is covered at no cost to you. Most people never schedule it. At that visit, you can ask for a basic metabolic panel that includes your kidney function, your thyroid levels, and your vitamin D. Those 3 numbers tell you whether seaweed is safe for you and whether the calcium in it has any chance of reaching your bones. That is a powerful use of a free appointment. Here is a simple monitoring framework you can start this week. Get a small notebook or open a note on your phone. For the next 7 days, write down 3 things every time you eat seaweed. What type it was, how you prepared it, and how you felt 2 to 3 hours later. Look for any pattern of fatigue, bloating, or energy changes. Most people will notice nothing unusual, and that is reassuring. But if you do notice something, you now have data to bring to your doctor. That is the kind of information that makes a visit useful instead of vague. You do not need to overhaul your diet. You do not need to become an expert in marine biology. You just need a few pieces of knowledge and the willingness to apply them. One change at a time. One meal at a time. The people I have seen do best over the years in my practice and in emergency medicine are not the ones who try to be perfect. They are the ones who notice things earlier, who adjust before the problem gets loud. Seaweed can be part of that, a small, affordable, deeply nutritious food that supports your bones, your blood pressure, your gut, and your metabolism. But only if you use it with the same care you would bring to any tool that matters. Your body gives you signals. The question is whether you have the right information to interpret them. That is what I am trying to give you. Not fear, not perfection, just the next useful step. I will see you in the next one.